This clip shocked me so much. I absolutely couldn't believe it. You got to watch this, Matt.
What I looked like when I met my boyfriend.
Hi, Dan. I just moved in next door. I'm a supermodel.
I don't care who the IRS sends. I am not paying taxes.
All right, this is a TikTok trend. That audio, there's multiple videos of this. Watch this one. Like, a lot of women are sort of flexing about how much weight they've gained.
Hi, Dan. I just moved in next door. I'm a supermodel.
I don't care who the IRS sends. I am not paying taxes.
This is playing directly into the fears that lots of guys have, though, because I have fielded a number of Hey Hero requests from guys who are scared to commit to their current girlfriend because she used to be overweight, or she's put on like a little bit of weight over the course of their relationships, and they're not attracted to fat women, and they're like, oh my God, what's going to happen in the future if I commit to her? You know, we merge finances, we have children, then I'm screwed. Like, I've given all my power away to her. I've committed. And then she has what? You know, she can promise she's not going to gain weight. She's going to try and stay attractive to me in the future. But what if she becomes, you know, frankly, like these women? Like, this is a real fear for lots of guys.
It's such a reasonable fear, I think, that one's partner will stop caring about the things that attracted you to them in the first place. Women have a version of this where they're worried that the men will lose their edge, essentially. And a lot of men do, and they are worried about that.
It's difficult for women to truly understand how terrifying that prospect of being with a woman and having her gain weight is. And the equivalence that you just mentioned right there could be a fantastic way of actually promoting some cross-gender understanding, because a man's equivalent to I'm scared my girlfriend's going to gain weight in the future when she was hot and young and skinny, you know, when she's young, could be my man was filled with so much drive and ambition and confidence when he was young. And then as he gets older, he just follows me around like a puppy dog, or he doesn't work and he has no friends and no life outside of me. Like, yeah, women, if that scares you, like you signed up for one thing and then you got given something completely different later on in life. So you feel a bit cheated. That's how a lot of men are scared their relationships are going to turn out to be. So is this a fear that you've had? Like, are you worried that your girlfriend's going to gain weight in the future?
My partner is, she's made kind of a lifestyle and is making a career out of health, both exercise and nutrition. And so it'd be really mind-blowing to me if she gave up on her commitment to health. It's hard for me to imagine my partner dramatically changing personality and suddenly just not caring about her health anymore. She would essentially be a different person. And that alone would be like almost grounds for ending a relationship. If you like change your personality entirely, it's like you're literally not who you were.
This would be, I'd say, like 12 years ago, at the very beginning of our relationship. Some of my girlfriend's friends, some of my, like, our mutual friends really, they were a bit upset with me, and I'll tell you the context why is because my girlfriend was looking through some pictures, and there was like this woman who dyed her hair like rainbow, you know, like blue, purple, green, like all of that in various stages, and then tied it in a knot. And like her and all her girlfriends would evidently like, oh, that's so beautiful, that's so cool. And my girlfriend made the offhand comment, oh, I'd love to do that with my hair. And one of her friends was like, oh, you should, that looks so great. And my girlfriend said, oh, Alex would never let me, you know? And then suddenly all the women were like, he'd never let you? Like, who is he to like control you? And she had to try and walk it back. And she's like, no, like he wouldn't like it. And I wouldn't, you know, want to upset him or anything like that. You know, she's trying to get across to him, but the damage had been done. I sounded like authoritarian or anything like that. Anyway, she came back and she told me this story, and like I wasn't thrilled at how I came across in that story. But then she said, well, to be fair, you know, you love my hair. My girlfriend's got gorgeous, like blonde curly hair. It's very natural. I love the natural look. Do you want me to have this artificial like rainbow look? And I was like, no, I really don't. She's like, well, that's accurate then. And I had to be confronted like right then with, well, okay, I'm made to feel like I'm like a bad guy because I wouldn't go along with this new radically different look that she chose. But I did kind of fall for the girl that she was and the appearance that she had. Like, I'm still loyal to that. Like, is it normal for me to just be able to shift physical attractive preferences. So what would you have done in my situation?
If she really, really wanted to dye her hair rainbow for some interesting reason, and it really mattered to her, I think it might be a worthy sacrifice.
I was suddenly confronted with the fact that I got an ego boost out of being a guy that had a girlfriend that I thought was beautiful, and everybody could see that she was beautiful. And in a sense, it reflected positively on me in that her particular beauty was, very classical, very natural, and I thought that that gave everybody a pretty good indication as to the kind of guy that I was, the sort of things that I valued. If I was walking around with a woman who looked like a stiletto Barbie doll, all plastic and makeup and things like that, it would say something very different about my personality, and it would be not accurate. And I don't like not being seen for who I am. And so when people saw me with my partner, I was like, yep, what you're seeing in her as it reflects on me is perfectly accurate. If I was to be seen with her in public and people are looking at me like, whoa, that's the kind of guy who likes a girl who has crazy rainbow hair, totally artificial, I'd be like, no, that's not me. And I'd feel like people were judging me inaccurately. They weren't seeing me correctly. But then that made me feel like, have I just got an ego attachment to having a pretty girlfriend?
Yes, so do I. And I don't want to say there's nothing wrong with that, but I think recognizing one's ego is different than succumbing to one's ego. Your ego holds a place in your psychology. It's not meant to be destroyed. It's just meant to not rule everything. And so I think it's okay to admit that we have preferences and to be straightforward with our partner that we have preferences and do that out of the gate. Actually, the more forward you are with that, assuming that you're loving and reasonable about it, I think your partner will respect that about you and it will never be a surprise.
Speaking of how I worried people would view me with a woman with rainbow hair, oh, that's not accurate. I have the same thing about being seen in public. If my girlfriend was hugely overweight, and just full disclosure, I don't really have any aesthetic preference for overweight at all. My preference goes to the skinny, I would dare say possibly even slightly unhealthily kind of skinny. I think that there's a normal weight that people have, whereas I like women even skinnier than that. I don't know, is that controversial? Possibly, but that's just
more fodder for the haters in the comment section, Alexander.
That's just my personal preference. But I think that if I was to be seen with a woman in public and she was really overweight, it wouldn't be a positive experience for my ego. I think there would be people kind of judging me can't he get with a thin girl? Or this is the kind of woman who doesn't, care about herself, doesn't take care of her body. She might have low self-esteem. She might have some kind of coping addiction mechanism. She just lacks willpower, whatever. There's a lot of negative personality traits that I personally associate with being overweight that then I would assume would get sort of transferred onto me.
Before we go there, I want to commend you for being willing to admit that, because it's our biases that run this deep. They could run a front, if that's a phrase, of many people's what they view as fair and reasonable. And I appreciate you being willing to own that. I have those myself. I don't have it as much for weight. I've been close to women who are on the too skinny side to the point where they're actually kind of wasting away, and it's very scary. And I would actually, if I had to pick, I would pick someone to be a little overweight than too underweight, just because I've seen the health complications that can come with being too underweight, and it's a little bit more dire in my experience. Well, let me meet you halfway, and I'll give you one of mine. I have the same feeling about intelligence and IQ. If I meet someone who, and it's estimation based off of conversation, but if I can tell that someone is just not up to my intellectual caliber, they would never pass gate 1 for a potential relationship, even though that's actually even less of their fault than weight, because weight is behavioral. Intelligence is for the most part heritable. And so even that, I'm still just hard no, sorry, not going there.
Have you seen this photo, Matt?
I have, yeah. I've actually spoken with a good friend of mine about this controversy quite a bit.
Okay, so for people who aren't aware, this is I think a model. Her name's Yumi Nu. I think once a year there's this magazine. It puts on a hot girl in a bikini. It's a sports magazine. Anyway, they did this overweight woman. I wouldn't have known anything about it except that Jordan Peterson decided to tweet this in response to it. He said, "Sorry, not beautiful, and no amount of authoritarian tolerance is going to change that."
I want to comment on how, because the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition is an iconic American thing, and your description revealed your Aussiness so much. It was amazing.
What I wanted to ask you is whether or not you find this woman beautiful, Matt. Do you think she's attractive, or do you agree with Jordan Peterson?
So Attractiveness has many levels, right? There's just sheer sexual attractiveness. There's facial symmetry. There's personality. There's behavior. Just based off the picture, she's actually, I would say, quite beautiful. But I would also say that based on my understanding of physiology, like human health and physiology, that she is likely overweight. She's beautiful, but I'm not attracted to her.
I mean, her face is beautiful to me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It's a little bit of a surprise. She doesn't seem to have gained weight on her face, or if it is on her face, it's well proportioned, or it's Photoshop and makeup.
It's makeup and Photoshop for sure.
Jordan's point seems to be that I think he's coming from this perspective that what we find attractive is something innate, biological to us. It's something we've evolved preferences for. And, you know, his whole kind of complaint is it usually seems to focus on, I don't like social constructivism. I don't like the idea that standards in society are just entirely cultural and that we can just, with enough willpower, just change that. You know, the blank slate theory, you know, that Steven Pinker talked about. And I'm inclined to agree with that. If this is part of like a larger agenda that's like designed to make men feel bad for having a preference for skinny women, that's definitely going to be confronting to me, because I'm not going to go along with that. You can't make me be attracted to an overweight woman any more than you can make me homosexual. You know, that's kind of the lesson that we should be learning about sexuality, is that our preferences are not really something that you can just pray away or, you know, or change. We're attracted to what we're attracted to, and we should kind of leave everybody alone. So yeah, look, he may be overreacting to this, but I think that the underlying point that he's making is like at least valid for discussion.
To comment on why they did this, why the magazine creators did this, it was all of those reasons. It's controversial. It probably does cater to some men's fantasies. It's woke, you know, it's body positivity and all of that. But it is funny to me that your sexual preference of women within a certain weight range, body fat percentage range, is deemed, you know, inappropriate, and yet we are encouraged to accept all other sexualities without question. And it's interesting when we start to see double standards, and you hear people kind of subtly dig at, say, oh, of course you're attracted to that. You've been taught to be attracted to that. It's kind of like an invalidation of the genuineness and the naturalness of what you feel.
There's definitely an argument to be made that there is social influence on what people find attractive. Like, of course, at some point, the big butt in women became like attractive. And I think it was like rap videos, or I didn't really follow it. But I'm like, oh God, it's gross. Like, I don't get it at all. But you see it enough and it's sexualized, and people do start to find it attractive. There's also a very famous study, I think Naomi Wolf wrote about it in The Beauty Myth, where they gave Western beauty magazines to like Pacific Islanders, like a Polynesian nation, and then the rates of anorexia and like bulimia just skyrocketed like hundreds of %. Like suddenly these, you know, perfectly healthy like Polynesian teenage girls, you know, with a bit of extra weight, like that's how it is, I suppose, a little bit there, and that was normal. But then suddenly they're seeing these starved supermodels, and then they're comparing themselves, and then like they just go crazy. Suddenly they're viewing their own bodies as less attractive because of the media that they've been exposed to. And so it's not a simple case of, right, like it's entirely biological, it's entirely social. I think they're feeding into each other, and they've changed. And I saw this tweet that one person wrote in response to Jordan Peterson. You realize that this was the standard of beauty during those ancient historical times you like waxing poetical about, right?
Yes, there's a bit of variation in standards of beauty, and you can track that historically speaking, but they have actually demonstrated consistent preferences of physical beauty in blind people based off of what they feel in a mannequin and say what they think is the most attractive. Like, it's generally consistent the world over. It's not exactly the same everywhere. There is some variation, and there's lots of variation within people, but to say that there's no standard and it's completely arbitrary and completely cultural is like, anyone who says that is either ideologically motivated or has spent zero time paying attention to the literature and that doesn't have epistemic humility.
I think is interesting in the context of this tweet here. Why do men feel it's their duty to publicly pronounce their view on the attractiveness of women? Couldn't you just keep it to yourself?
Oh, if they knew how much we keep to ourselves. There's a great Louis C.K. bit about the kind of, when women say that they have dirty thoughts, and he's like, no, you have no idea how bad it is for men. They really don't. But this idea of like, keep it, just, you know, if you don't like it, just shut up. You know, it's it's such a like a 5-year-old's way of approaching a discussion is to just stop talking and the problem goes away.
But I suppose it's not really a comment about that woman. He's more making a comment about the agenda in society. And so it's like you'd have to know Jordan a bit and where he's coming from. Like it'd be very easy to misunderstand him. I want to finish talking about Jordan with this particular tweet here. My guy, you look like a child's skeleton covered in mayonnaise with dryer lint on the top. You're in no position to be assessing anybody's beauty, you rickety junkie.
Jesus. Yeah, one more reason to not be on Twitter. That's a lot of body shaming and a lot of drug addiction shaming as well. This guy he's violating all kinds of norms.
It's so fascinating, though, that double standard, I suppose, that exists. Like, people just go to town on the physical appearance of people who have different ideologies than you. And then suddenly all the compassion just completely leaves, you know? It really speaks to how hollow the values that so many people are espousing when it really just comes down to tribalism. If you're on my team, then you're good. If you're on the enemy side, then there's really no attack that's off limits. And I wanted to finish by talking about Pierce Brosnan. I don't know if you saw this when this this did the rounds on the internet. First photo is of actor Pierce Brosnan and his wife 20 years ago, the start of their marriage. The second photo is them today. When fools pointed out to him that she'd put on weight, he simply replied, "She is, in my eyes, the most beautiful woman in the world. She raised my 5 children with love. In the past, I already loved her for her personality and not just for her beauty. Now I love her even more. I am very proud of her and I always try and be worthy of her." When you've been through that pair bonding process with a person, the weight gain matters a lot less than you think it's going to. And I had a friend tell me once when I was talking about my own fears about being with a partner who might gain weight, he said, "You're not going to care in the future because if you knew her when she was at her prime and you had that experience with her, there's going to be an echo of that throughout the rest of your experience. You know, it's not like you're getting together with her while she's overweight. You knew her when she was absolutely young, gorgeous, and you'll see that in her eyes and you'll have those memories and it'll all be special." And so my general feeling to men is don't like feel ashamed about being worried about this. That's perfectly normal and natural, but don't worry too much. It's going to turn out to be less of a big deal than you think it is.